Good evening, everybody. It is Steve Schmidt, and welcome to this edition of The Warning Conversations with Stephen Beschloss, filmmaker, author, journalist, and fellow Substacker. I urge everybody on here to read his America Substack. It is very good. And one of the things that I talk about all the time, that I write about frequently, is the importance of being well informed. And the fact of the matter is that all of the information that you need to be well informed, to know what is happening, is available. You just have to exert the energy to know where to go and look for it. America is a great Substack, and you should spread the word about it and share it. And I think as these platforms reach into new places, more and more people hear them. We help contribute ultimately to a civic renewal, to a civic reawakening that must come as this era ultimately, as it must, fades in to the black, as it passes by. We have more stormy days ahead of us. We'll talk more about that. We have Lisa with us. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you, Steve. So there are a lot of questions tonight, and hopefully we can get through as many as possible. So hoping that you can answer in a succinct way. The first question I'll ask of you, Stephen. Janet Shapiro wants to know, going back to the top of the conversation, how does someone like Rudy Giuliani get lured into the MAGA cult?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My simple answer would be that he's somebody who has always been drawn to power. He saw the rise of Trump, who was an old friend of his, and went on the ride with him. Whether there were moments along that path where he had disagreement, I think he quickly made the decision that align with Trump and tossing aside the rule of law to fulfill Trump's intentions was at the heart of his craven desire for power.
Thank you. Steve Schmidt, Homi Hormazji saw a tweet today, or a post on X from Mark Jacobs, who really got to the heart of our current quandary by stating, "I'll never get over the fact that nearly half of US voters support the most dishonest, disgusting, ignorant, vicious, treasonous person in public life. The last decade has been a devastating indictment of American values." How did this happen?
It happened because there have been a profound collapse of trust between the American people and a lot of the most important institutions of the country. And it has created all of the conditions necessary for the rise of a demagogue. In a time of unrivaled peace and prosperity against all of human history from the beginning of time, that there has been a breaking of the social compact. There is 40% of the country that has $400 cash available. And I beg of all of you to be open-minded about what I'm about to say to you, which is this: corruption does not belong to Donald Trump. When Senator Robert Menendez was found with the gold bars, the Senate Majority Leader said, Chuck Schumer said, he's been a great public servant for the people of New Jersey. Who does that help? What cause does that aid? What cynicism does that fuel? And so it's really easy to make the judgment and to want to yell at everybody. And there's a lot of MAGA supporters in my family. And hitting someone in the head may feel good for you, but it's not going to change anyone's mind. And so there are values that we have in common that we have to articulate better, that we have to celebrate better. But yes, it is an indictment of national character when the most loathsome character is a choice of a significant amount of the country. But at the same time, you have to have the level of introspection necessary to say in a two-party system, in a two-team sport league, how can it be that the pro-democracy team is losing to the pro-insurrection team? How is the kindness team losing to the cruelty team and all that goes along with that?
So I'm now going to ask a couple of questions about the media. First to you, Stephen. Sam Erdak asks, Fox News is undermining our national security. Why haven't they been shut down?
You know, we still have the First Amendment. We still have, and Steve, maybe you're better in the details of the policy of this. You know, we still have their ability to be able to, shall we say, sort of navigate that path that allows them to ride the fence of speech that is not considered hate speech or is not otherwise considered crossing a line that could be criminally charged, which, you know, along with the Federal Communication Commission's limitations that gives a news organization the ability to function. They've been able to continue to straddle that. I think I would love to hear, Steve, if you have a notion, if there's a way to finally break that.
I'm a First Amendment absolutist, and what I'd say to Sam, who's one of the great warning subscribers and contributors to the community, is that one of the most important free speech cases in American history involved the defense of the Nazi Party to march in the most heavily Jewish town in the country, Skokie, Illinois, by the ACLU, by a Jewish attorney. And what I urge you to do is to have faith in the First Amendment and to appreciate what it is. It bars the prohibition by the government, right, of speech. Now, Elon Musk says I'm a free speech advocate, and the evidence of my being a free speech advocate is the cesspool I've created in my private sector enterprise that has no standards. That's not free speech. That's a sewer. But the government in this country must not, cannot, and never restrict speech, no matter how loathsome it may be. And when you think about loathsome right-wing speech, I'll just tell you a quick story, Sam. Going back to World War II, one of the obnoxious proprietors of the day, the Rupert Murdoch of the moment, was Colonel McCormick, who ran the Chicago Sun-Times, and he was an ardent foe of FDR's. And what he did after the Battle of Midway, to spite FDR and the American victory, was publish the fact that the United States had broken the Japanese code. And that was one of the most closely held secrets of the war. FDR, who had a mellow personality and was gracious towards people, wanted to hang him and insisted that he be hung for treason until he was calmed down. So this is nothing new. There are injurious organizations that act with great irresponsibility. But the restriction of speech by government always leads down a slippery slope to a very, very dark place.
I mean, I would just add at this particular moment, the tragedy is that mass communication has become so mass and so powerful that the ability of one so-called news organization to have a scale of impact probably beyond any other, news organization maybe in the history of the country.
What I would say too is somebody who has been smeared by these networks and these organizations, the way you remedy this is not by locking up news executives and restricting speech. It is by loosening libel laws. Because I should have the ability to have an action against any one of a number of news organizations who have defamed, who have smeared, who have lied. And because I'm a public figure, it's almost impossible. If you put a financial reward
Mm.
for the lies in the terms of profits, you will get more of it. If you increase liability legally for the lies, you will get less of it. It's a very, very simple construct, and you've seen it all through American business. When American companies were dumping shit in every river in the country, the way that that stopped is the enormous legal liabilities that were imposed civilly and criminally. And that's how you deal with it. You deal with civil litigation on the cost of telling lies and defaming people's character, and have a updated 21st century kind of libel law and structure. And you look at the Dominion case, has that affected Fox's behavior? It has affected Fox's behavior because they have 787 million reasons not to lie
Right.
about it again, and they have another $1 billion case in front of them.
Right. The question is, how many more billions will it take before they finally decide to stop it?
Well, maybe it takes $80 billion,
Mm.
right? Maybe it takes $50 billion, but I promise you, there's an amount of money in cash. That's the breaking point.
Mm. Mm.
Okay, next question. John Atta asks, even if Trump loses in 24, he won't concede, and we basically have a party that is anti-democratic and continuing to overthrow democracy. What can be done, Stephen?
Well, I think the preface of the question, the premise of the question is exactly right. Under no circumstances will Trump say that he lost, whatever the numbers are, which is why, I've been advocating for as massive a turnout as possible to make clear that that's once again a lie and intolerable. I think we're going to be carrying a population that doesn't believe in democracy and a leadership that's willing to go along with the lie to be able to sustain their own position. That doesn't mean that Trump is going to take power, come January in 2025, but it does mean that it will take, I think, at the very least, an overwhelming defeat for that lie to be, I think, as clear as possible for as large a population as possible.
So building on that, Ken, Richard asks, how do we get people to care about democracy? Because his belief is that it's apathy that's killing our democracy, Steve.
Well, Trump's coalition is essentially a coalition of fanatics plus apathy, plus lassitude, indifference towards the moment. This notion that there's no difference between the parties, and that has always been the Achilles heel of any democratic system. What I would say is there is no magic word, right? It's not a magic wand. It's not the opposite of invoking Voldemort, right? Democracy has to be explained, renewed. It's a faith. And there's a really important speech that Franklin Roosevelt gives in 1936. It's the convention speech. And Joe Biden needs to read this speech 5,000 times, because what FDR says in the speech is, we're Americans, and there was a king once upon a time, and there were dukes and all these monarchs, and we got rid of the king. But now there's new monarchs, and there's new kings, and there's new royalty, and there's always going to be new kings, and we got to get rid of those kings. And he explains democracy in a very accessible way. You have heard me talk about the story of the woman in Ohio, a 27-year-old Black woman who is arrested for desecrating a corpse, who has a miscarriage in her 25th week, and she is charged with crime. And her story is that she goes to the hospital on the first day. She waits for 8 hours. She's not seen. She has some bleeding. Hospital convenes an ethics committee hearing because of the Ohio abortion law. She's not seen on the second return, and on the third day is when she has the miscarriage. Does she live in a democracy? I don't think she lives in a democracy. If you're a black parent and you live in terror about your young black son going out behind the wheel at night driving to work, do you live in a democracy? Not all the time. What if you're in the cohort of 40% that doesn't have $400, or you're 10 million plus people in the country who are deemed unbanked by Jamie Dimon and the other bank CEOs? Do they live in a democracy? And so the expansion of democracy has always been at the heart of the contestation of values in American politics. Should women have the right to vote? Should blacks have the right to vote? Should Latino farm workers have the right to organize for a living wage? Should people's human dignity and human rights be recognized? And that is the essential fight at hand in this moment right now.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's such a big question, and I just want to say one thing, which is because we haven't touched on abortion, but I think there's no question that the issue around, women's freedom, reproductive freedom, is going to be at the heart of this election, I think, along with democracy, and that as much as anything is also a matter of democracy. Do half of our country have the right to have control of their own bodies? Does half of our country, have the right to make decisions for themselves as part of a system of government that's committed to self-governance? And the stripping of it away looks an awful lot like it's the end of self-governance. And I think we have in many ways, an opportunity through the discussion of reproductive rights, an opportunity also to talk about the meaning of democracy.
So we are out of time, but I'm going to ask each of you this final question asked by Suzanne Taylor. And I'll ask you to answer first, Stephen. If you ran the world, what would you do to straighten it out?
Goodness. Sorry, that's supposed to be like a one-sentence answer. What I would say is that there are two overarching existential dangers facing the planet right now. One is the potential demise of democracy. The other is the climate crisis that has profound implications for the health of the planet and the survival of the human species. And I think that the future, in many ways, has to be more about cooperation, and not cooperation just within our borders, but between borders, between regions. I think that our global institutions haven't been working very well, but I think there are versions of that, regional cooperative entities, that need to be formed if we're going to have a chance to deal with a lot of our problems that are not defined by nations, not defined by borders.
And Steve Schmidt, what would you do to straighten out the world if you ran it?
I would say everything that Steven said plus reggae for all reggae for all the people.
More reggae.
More reggae.
So I will turn things back over to you, Steve, to close things out.
Well, with more reggae for all the people, we can solve some of the world's problems at least. But it was a real pleasure to be joined by Stephen Beschloss. Again, Substack America. We live in a consequential moment and a consequential time. Stephen Beschloss is a serious person, not an alarmist person. And when you understand history and you appreciate at face value what is being said, what is being done, the promises being made, the strategies being employed, the promises being laid down, into whom, you can come to no other conclusion that this is a moment of grave national crisis that requires the participation of all good citizens and American patriots everywhere, and to understand that nationalism has always been the enemy of humanity, that nationalism is the enemy of American patriotism. I'm Steve Schmidt. This is the warning, and I invite you to subscribe on our Substack, on our YouTube channel. Follow us. Welcome to the community.